In this video, we'll discuss about Rubi LASER, which is basically a solid state laser. Question will come like this. Discuss principal construction and working of Rubi LASER. Now, what are the uses of Rubi LASER? Or you will asked to write a short note on Rubi LASER. Rubi LASER is a 3-level laser. This laser was first invented by Theodore Maman in the year 1960. Theodore Maman invented the world's first solid-state laser known as the Rubi laser in 1960. Rubi laser is composed of basically aluminum oxide, and it is doped with chromium atoms. Chromium atoms, this gives the ruby its vibrant color, that is the red or pink color, that is due to the chromium oxide. For a good lasing action, the ruby crystal consists of about 0.05% by weight of chromium. The chromium and oxygen atoms of the corundum means a crystalline form of aluminum oxide containing traces of iron, titanium, vanadium and chromium. Traces means the presence of these materials, that is the iron, titanium, vanadium and chromium is very small, and the aluminum and the oxygen atoms of the corundum, that is in the aluminum oxide, they are inert. They do not take part in the reaction. The chromium ions are the active ingredients. So you get laser action or laser light due to the chromium ions in the compound. So before going to know about the principle of the Rubi laser, we first discuss about the working. Because if you first know the working, then it will be very easier to know the principle. Now let us discuss construction, then we will discuss about the working. This is the basic construction of your Rubi laser. It consists of a ruby rod. You see, this is a ruby rod. This is a ruby rod. The length of this rod from this to this, it is equal to 28 centimeter, and diameter of this rod is basically up to 2.5 centimeter. And there is a flash lamp arrangement surrounding the rod. This is a flash lamp arrangement. You might have seen flash lamp in the market. So this is a flash lamp which surrounds the ruby rod. And the flash rod is operated, or it glows at a very high voltage. You see the rod, it is a basic diagram, and the rod is connected to a high voltage source, and due to this high voltage source, when applied, the flashlight glows. You see, one end of the rod is covered by highly silvered reflector. This side is covered by highly silvered reflector, and the other end is covered with partially silvered reflector. Why partially silvered reflector? Because the part where the silvering is less, and their laser beam can comes out. That is why this side is covered with partially silvered reflector. In first Rubi laser made by Maman, there was arrangement for cooling the system. Now the cooling system, we are not giving the cooling system in the setup, but at first there were cooling system. You see, there is arrangement for cold water and outgoing hot water, so that the system will be cooled. So in this construction you see when and how it works. Now we will discuss how it works. As I have told you, this is a three-level laser. The Ruby laser is a three-level laser. I will show you the mechanism in three-level laser. I have discussed the three-level theory of the three-level laser in previous video. In three-level laser you have three states of energy. This state is suppose E1, this state is E2 and this state is E3. This is lower energy state and this is highest energy state and this is medium energy state. The lower energy state is called your ground state and the highest energy state, this is called your excited state and this is called your metastable state. So when pumping action takes place, what happens? You give supply energy, what happens? There will be transition of electrons or the atomic transition takes place from ground state to excited state, but the time period of the electrons or atoms here is very less, so it comes back to the metastable state, and in metastable state the time period is more than the excited state, and lasing action takes place when the electrons they jump from the metastable state to ground state. They radiate energy, and if the energy radiation of energy lies between your visible region, then you can see. If it lies in the visible region, you cannot see. But in this case only, when there is transition of electrons from metastable state to ground state, and the lasing action takes place. So when white light enters a crystal, I have shown you in the construction, by means of flash light you give white light, and white light when enters the ruby crystal, strong absorption of the chromium ions in the blue-green part of the spectrum occurs, and electrons are excited and move from ground state to the excited state. Some of the electrons drop down to the metastable state, creating population inversion. I have discussed about population inversion in the previous video. The electrons from the metastable state create standing waves due to a reflection, as a result of which coherent stimulation of light waves occurs, producing laser. So this is the mechanism in Ruby laser. White light comes from the flash lamp, and the white light it is absorbed by the chromium ions in the blue-green part of the spectrum. Then electrons are excited and move from ground state to excited state. Some of the electrons drop down to the metastable state, creating population inversion. The electrons from metastable state creates standing waves due to the reflection, as a result of which coherent stimulation of the light waves occurs, producing laser. We will see how standing wave produced, and due to the production of standing wave, coherence occurs and lasing action takes place. You see, this is the ruby rod, as we have discussed, and from the ruby rod you get light or photon, and all the photons are not useful. Some photons may escape from this system, and you have two obstructions. One is your highly silver reflector, another is partially silver reflector. So if you have two obstructions and you have waves, then they produce standing waves. We have read it that if you have two obstructions and waves are allowed to move through two obstructions, then they produce standing waves. And these standing waves produces coherent stimulation. Remember, these standing waves produces coherence stimulations, producing laser. and laser comes out because of it is partially silvered, and this is the basic principle in Ruby laser. Okay, and you can write the principle in the beginning, but why I have told you in the at the end, because after knowing the mechanism you can easily write the principle. So the emitted photon from the metastable state make coherence after suffering reflection from both the ends of the reflector, producing laser beam, and this is the basic principle in Ruby laser. Now we will discuss some uses of Ruby laser. Ruby lasers are used in optical holography. What is optical holography? Holography means the process for creating a whole image, that is a 3D image. So you can prepare the 3D image, you can create 3D image by optical holography process, which is basically done by Ruby lasers. Ruby lasers can be used for the measurement of plasma properties such as electron density and temperature. And Ruby laser is useful for melanin of the skin, for the tattoos. These can be removed using this laser. Melanin means this is the color of the skin. You might have seen the black color of the skin produced due to melanin, and you have also seen tattoos, that is the design on body, and this can be removed. Melanin and tattoos can be removed by using this laser. So these are some uses of Ruby laser. So in this video we discussed what is Ruby laser, then what is the principle of Ruby laser, what is the construction of Ruby laser, and the working, and what are the uses of Ruby laser. In the next video we will discuss about helium neon laser. Thank you.